Leaders from Britain, France, Germany, and Finland said that they would be at Zelensky's side for this next round of negotiations at the White House. Basically, they wanted to go better than the last time he visited the Oval Office back in February, when this happened.
Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
What an It's Monday, August 18th. I'm Jane Coaston, and this is What a Day, the show that is excited for Taylor Swift to release a new album and not excited for the absolutely deranged takes that will result from Taylor Swift releasing a new album. On today's show, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky returns to the White House to meet with President Donald Trump. And former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke is slapped with a restraining order for supporting the Texas Democrats' redistricting fight. But let's start with universities. Imagine you're a researcher at a major university. You're working on something really, really important. Cures for cancer, ways to mitigate climate change, big-time solutions to big-time problems. But the President of the United States has decided that he is very, very mad at your university for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with you. And your funding has been cut. But now a judge is saying that the funding cuts were wrong, so what happens next? That's the very real situation researchers at the University of California, Los Angeles find themselves in as the Trump administration continues its war on America's universities. Case in point, earlier this month, the Trump administration demanded that UCLA pay $1 billion to the federal government to resolve alleged civil rights violations centering on antisemitism. That was on top of more than $500 million in cuts to federal research funding, to funding from the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, and other federal sources. But then on Friday, a judge said, nope, here's LA's NBC affiliate.
Remember that massive funding freeze impacting more than $580 million in UCLA science research grants? We first told you about it a couple of weeks ago. Well, now a federal judge says that money has to be restored.
In her ruling on a lawsuit brought by faculty in the University of California system against the Trump administration, U.S. District Judge Rita Lynn found that the cuts to UCLA's funding violated her order stopping the administration from blocking NSF research grants to University of California schools. However, her ruling only restores funding for a portion of the UCLA grants that got cut. Hundreds of millions of dollars in research funding from the National Institutes of Health and the Department of Energy are still on hold. So to talk more about the impact these funding cuts have had and how the judge's ruling will or won't help, I spoke to Dr. Ardhna Tripati, a professor of climate science and geochemistry at UCLA, and Monique Trinh, a program manager in pathology and laboratory medicine at UCLA's David Geffen School of Medicine. Professor Ardhna Tripati and Monique Trinh, welcome to What a Day.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're delighted to be here, although sorry about the circumstances.
Right.
Definitely.
Speaking of those circumstances, a federal judge ruled that the Trump administration has to either restore some science grants or come up with a new rationale soon, like Tuesday, to hold back the money. We're trying to parse this out. So what is your best understanding of what money is being restored or will possibly be restored?
There were about 800 grants that were suspended, NIH grants, NSF grants, and Department of Energy grants. We saw that about 300 NSF grants were restored. So great news, but the NIH grants and the DOE grants are still suspended, and the political football we're anticipating will continue.
How much of your own work has been affected, and what kind of work have you been doing that's been impacted by this?
Yeah, in case of my work, I've had now 4 grants, all of my federal funding impacted. But let me just give you an idea of what that means. That's about $10 million worth of federal funding that's supporting about 250 people. It's supporting community members, promotoras, supporting veterans. It's supporting undergraduates, graduate students. It's supporting community college students, students at UCLA. It's supporting researchers at UCLA. It's supporting faculty. It literally is disrupting 250 people's lives. And that's just 4 grants. What I've just told you the story of is that there's more than 800 grants that have been impacted. Monique, maybe you could share a bit about what you've been hearing at the medical school and more broadly.
Yeah, so in my professional life, I serve in roles that span quality improvement, health equity strategy, laboratory stewardship, and restorative practices in academic medicine. For me personally, when I think about these cuts and I speak about science and public health, I carry two things with me: my lived experience as a first-generation college graduate and the lessons that my mom left behind, who was a patient who received research-driven care at UCLA Health. And when the treatments no longer worked for her, she joined clinical trials because she deeply believed in paying it forward. And so her story to me really highlights the impact of these cuts on a personal level. And beyond that, as a staff member who's been at UCLA for 14 years, I've seen the impact firsthand to my friends, right? When these budget cuts happen, my colleagues lose opportunities, labs close projects early, teams are stretched thin, and families, including my own, feel the strain. I think one important thing I would highlight is that these cuts don't just slow innovation, they deeply create waste. They force skilled people to spend more time navigating bureaucratic hurdles, duplicating work, or shifting priorities midstream instead of working at the top of their license. And as a result, precious time and resources are spent on whiplash and paperwork rather than advancing research, improving care, or addressing the needs of patients and communities.
Can you tell me a little bit more, either of you, like what kinds of research and science are specifically at risk? Like, I totally understand how I'm anxious thinking about the back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But I think for people listening, they might not be aware of the types of research that the Trump administration has decided, not very important.
So our grants are on issues relating to supporting climate resilience right here in LA, across California, and across the country by training graduate students from all disciplines to be able to work with external stakeholders, with businesses, with community partners, from housing authorities, from folks that are working with tribal authorities to support land management and water management practices that would lead us to be more climate resilient. There was another project that was impacted that's around issues of water right here in California and in the Southwest, and supporting research that's been done on water quality and water access, and water education. There was a third project that was supporting veterans at East LA Community College and at UCLA getting training, getting STEM training, getting mentorship, and helping to prepare them for careers. And then a fourth project to support women of color faculty working across the UCs so that they can, be in communities, support undergraduate students and graduate students, and continue with their professional development. The grants that are being impacted, though, from some of my colleagues, they include folks who are doing work on clinical trials, just like those clinical trials that impacted Monique's mom. There are grants that relate to drug discovery, vaccine development, maternal disparities, that exist.
I wanted to actually ask, these court actions surrounding research, you mentioned feeling like a yo-yo or a football, which is not how you should be feeling. How are you even doing your work at this point where you're like, oh, no more grants. Oh, new grant. Oh, judge ruled. Other judge ruled. How are you even doing your jobs?
I mean, and that's the point, right? The chaos, the distraction is the point. We are not meant to be able to focus on doing the work that is for the public good, and students are not meant to be the hopes of their families and communities and focus on realizing their aspirations. We're meant to be in this state of siege and terror, just like what has been happening with federal employees since the beginning of the year, and just like with what's been happening with the ICE raids. This is my opinion, that this is like a tried and true playbook style practice for how you dismantle institutions. So I beg people to realize what is happening. This is not about anti-Semitism, right? The university is doing a huge amount to combat anti-Semitism. Freezing research does not do that, right? All that does, you can't turn research on and off. You can't turn education and training on and off.
Even if you get funding restored for the time being, we're early in this administration. Can you tell me a little bit more about that effort to basically make California a bulwark against whatever the federal administration might do? Because I just keep thinking about how you have at least 3.5 years to go with a federal leadership that wants to undercut your work. And I'm just curious to know a little bit more about your thinking on how to stand up for the UC system and ensure that your work can continue whatever the federal government is doing.
Yeah, this is a time for solidarity. So it is not about my work or your work. It is about our work. And please, I would really ask people who are listening to see that the work of the UC system, it is a public good. Folks who get treated from the UCLA health system or folks who have family members who are employed by the UCs. But it also means impacts on K through 12 education. It means impacts on community college and Cal State budgets. And it also means impacts on funding for prisons, right? Because that all comes from the general fund. When we stand up for UCLA and the UC system and the public good we represent, we will continue to stand together in the face of this administration for the next 3.5 years.
I think the only thing I would add is that as a UC public school system, or the public higher education, we're critical to enhancing social mobility for individuals. And as a first generation professional and student myself, I think that it's really critical for us to remember our role and our vision of not only sustaining and strengthening the University of California's position as the preeminent university system in the world, but also that as a health system, our goal is to take a collaborative approach and being recognized as the foundation for building the preeminent data-driven learning healthcare system that improves the human condition. And as a safety anchor institute, we are tasked, right, with not only protecting the public good, but protecting those that are the least resourced. And those are going to be the ones that are harmed first and hardest when these budget cuts happen.
Dr. Ardhna Tripati and Monique Trinh, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Jane.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate you so much.
If you search for news on YouTube, you're going to find Ben Shapiro, Turning Point USA, basically right-wing propaganda designed to keep you confused and, most importantly, mad. There are massive structural disadvantages for progressive voices on YouTube. When you subscribe to What A Day, you help us surface progressive political news in the algorithm, get it in front of more people, reach undecided voters, and just do a better job. We give you the facts from the people at the heart of the story, while staying irreverent, engaging, and fast. So subscribe to our channel. It really does help. What A Day is brought to you by Bombas. Summer is moving fast. Don't let bad socks and blisters stop you in your tracks. Bombas makes socks, slides, and seamless essentials to keep up with however you pace your days. Running a marathon? Bombas makes socks for that, with sweat-wicking, blister-fighting, and impact cushioning built in. Are you just running errands? They've got pairs to elevate your look while keeping it so comfortable, with features like ultra-soft cotton and cushy footbeds. Plus, tagless tees and seamless sweat-wicking underwear so good, you'll wonder where it's been all your life. Best of all, they don't just feel good, they do good. One purchased equals one donated to someone who needs it. Neat, right? You can also order Bombas abroad. That's right. Along with the US, they now ship internationally to over 200 countries. Bombas makes the most comfortable socks I have ever had. So head over to bombas.com and use code DAY for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com, code DAY at checkout.
Headline. It's important that America agrees to work with Europe to provide security guarantees for Ukraine, and we are very thankful to the United States and to the President for such signal, and therefore for everyone in Europe. This is a significant change, but there are no details how it will work and what America's role will be, what Europe's role will be, what the EU can do.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke with European and NATO leaders at a news conference in Brussels on Sunday ahead of his meeting with President Trump today. This comes on the heels of Trump's summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday in Alaska, which Zelensky was not invited to. And the narrative seems to have shifted from a potential ceasefire toward Putin's agenda of making sure Ukraine doesn't join NATO or even the European Union. Leaders from Britain, France, Germany, and Finland pledged a united front of support for Ukraine and said that they would be at Zelensky's side for this next round of negotiations at the White House. Basically, they wanted to go better than the last time he visited the Oval Office back in February, when this happened.
Have you said thank you once? this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
What an asshole. One strategist told the Associated Press that the European leaders will have to make sure they don't appear to be ganging up on Trump because he doesn't typically respond well to that. Because it would be terrible to get ganged up on in the Oval Office, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Speaking to the press after his meeting with Trump in Alaska on Friday, Putin said that other European leaders could, quote, create obstacles to derail potential progress. The Russian leader also has not yet agreed to meet with both Trump and Zelensky together.
Why did the State Department just announce that they're halting visitor visas for all Gazans coming here for medical aid? Why would some of these kids, for example, who are coming to hospitals for treatment be a threat?
Great question from Margaret Brennan, host of CBS's Face the Nation Sunday. Secretary of State Marco Rubio must have a reasonable answer, right?
Well, first of all, it's not just kids. It's a bunch of adults that are accompanying them. Second, we had outreach from multiple congressional offices asking questions about it. And so we're going to reevaluate how those visas are being granted, not just to the children, but how those visas are being granted to the people who are accompanying them.
I guess we'll see how long it takes for these visas spurred by medical emergencies to be evaluated. The State Department's pause came down Saturday, just a day after conservative activist Laura Loomer questioned them. That is, she posted a slew of racist and Islamophobic tweets calling the kids' medical flights a national security threat and saying, quote, we are not the world's hospital. Lady, who is the we here? But Rubio said there was evidence from congressional offices that some of the organizations involved in obtaining the visas have strong links to terrorist groups.
So we are not going to be in partnership with groups that are friendly with Hamas. So we're going to pause those visas. There was just a small number of them issued to children, but they come with adults accompanying them, obviously. And
we're going to cut him off there so you don't need to hear him repeat himself without offering any other useful information. The organization Heal Palestine said in a statement Sunday that it was, quote, distressed by the State Department's decision. After treatment, it says the kids and family members who accompanied them to the U.S. returned to the Middle East. More National Guard troops are headed to the nation's capital to address the so-called hellscape of, as the president so eloquently described, quote, crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor. Republican governors of 3 states, West Virginia, South Carolina, and Ohio, said on Saturday they would be sending hundreds of additional troops to Washington, D.C. at the request of President Trump. West Virginia pledged to deploy 300 to 400, South Carolina will send 200, and Ohio will send 150. West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey said his state is, quote, proud to stand with President Trump in his effort to restore pride and beauty to our nation's capital. This is a significant escalation of the president's overhaul of policing in Washington after he issued an executive order last week, putting local police forces under federal control and deploying about 800 D.C. National Guard troops. The expansion came as protesters pushed back on federal law enforcement and National Guard troops over the weekend.
Fuck Donald Trump! Fuck Donald Trump! Fuck Donald Trump!
National Guard members have been patrolling at horrifying crime establishments, real dens of evil, like the National Mall and Union Station, and assisting law enforcement with things like crowd control. So it's not really clear yet why additional troops are needed.
It's up to you and me to show them that in Texas, our knees do not bend. In fact, thanks to everyone who has joined this fight, we were able to make more than $1 million donation to the House Democratic Caucus, the Black Caucus, the Mexican American Caucus, and we are going to continue to fight, to raise, to organize, to register, to mobilize.
That's former Texas Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke rallying a crowd of protesters at the Texas State Capitol Saturday. He's talking about money his political group raised for the Texas House Democratic Caucus after 50 of its members left the state to prevent their fellow Republican legislators from redrawing the state's electoral maps to get more congressional seats in the 2026 midterms. Well, O'Rourke's fundraising didn't go over too well with Texas Judge Megan Fahey. On Saturday, she expanded a restraining order against O'Rourke originally issued by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. It officially barred him and his group from sending money to what she called unexcused Texas legislators. The Texas Dems have been hanging out in blue states since early August. They get fined $500 for each day they fail to attend the legislative session. In a statement last week, The House Democratic Caucus said its members plan to return to their home state ahead of today's hearing, but each member has their own timeline, according to CBS News. That means the redistricting measure could finally pass if enough of them return to restore the quorum. And that's the news. That's all for today. If you like the show, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, celebrate a true DC legend, and tell your friends to listen. And if you're into reading, and not just about how we've been talking a lot about DC on this show lately, so you should go enjoy the DC institution known as Go-Go Music. Like me, What A Day is also a nightly newsletter. Check it out and subscribe at crooked.com/subscribe. I'm Jane Coaston, and this past Saturday featured a DC celebration of funk music pioneer Chuck Brown, who died in 2012. Because his band, his music, and the soul of Washington, D.C. will never die.